Your host of Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. If you're able to join me live this afternoon, please leave me the hashtag live, and if you're joining me on replay at some future point in time, leave me the hashtag replay and I will catch up with you in the comments. Now this is my regular Tuesday afternoon slot of going live from my garden at 4:30 in the afternoon. It's a little bit overcast today, but I've been doing a little light gardening and it's hot work, it's quite humid. So let me know in the world whereabouts you are, what time it is with you, and perhaps a snapshot of your weather forecast too. So I've titled the video, "My Garden is Ruined and Will It Ever Recover?" So a little bit of a secret is I never ever show you this part of the garden in my Facebook lives or my YouTube lives. I keep you over that side of the garden where it's always looked very managed and pretty. And the reason why I've previously avoided showing you this part of the garden is because we had lots of sheds, outbuildings there. We had a tortoise, we had a pair of rabbits, we had an aviary which had at one time budgerigars in it and zebra finches and latterly canaries, and beyond that we had our chicken shed which had usually between 3 and 5 chickens. Now if you are a regular member of my Facebook group Flower Start World, and actually if you want to join that group there's a link to it in the description underneath the video, you know that I normally film those videos in my kitchen and the backdrop is my garden, so you may well recognise the trunk of my tree with the purple foliage, but you've probably seen before that there was a huge laurel bush here, and that was disguising the chicken sheds. There was a choicea bush in front which was partially disguising the aviary, and everything else was pretty much low, so I didn't mean disguising. So we've had a little bit of change in the garden. The help that we usually have when we go on holidays, for instance, has dried up a little bit. We've been relying on one of our neighbours and it's just getting a bit too much for them. The rabbits died quite some time ago, so the hutch for them, a very super deluxe hutch which my husband built for them, has disappeared a long time ago. We did at one time take in rescue hedgehogs, but that sort of dried up. And we have rehomed our tortoise, rehomed the canaries, and rehomed the chickens too, and everything lay empty for several months while we were deciding what to do. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago we made the decision that we were going to clear everything, and we paid a local contractor to dismantle everything and take it away and dispose of it. Now that leaves us the problem of what are we going to do with it. So my husband as well is, he's the main gardener, the head gardener. I just help him do some of the heavy lifting work. He's increasingly finding that perhaps the garden isn't sparking him with joy as it usually has done in previous years. And for ease, he wanted just to seed the earth here and to have an expanse of lawn. And secretly, those of you who've been following me for a while will know that I'm always bemoaning the fact that we don't have any flowers in our garden, which is rather bizarre because I am the florist that teaches. I run flower arranging classes in person and online, and I haven't got a garden. I'm very envious of those of you who've got green fingers and you've got gardens and you come along to class with all your homegrown materials, and all the time I'm buying things that I've bought from a flower farmer or from a supermarket or from a local florist. So I thought this may well be my opportunity to have a cutting garden. My husband, I don't think I'm being unfair on him at all, and I don't think he's being unfair on me when he says you're going to get bored of this, Julie, very quickly. And I would say that I am not a gardener. I love having a pretty garden. I love having cut flowers. I love arranging my flowers. But as soon as it gets down to tending or digging holes to plant things and all that kind of knowledge, it is just way out of my comfort zone and probably way out of my interest zone here. So I am here to get a little bit of moral support from you. I'm interested in quite a few things. Now, what I am going to do, one of my sisters is doing some gardening qualifications, and I did reach out to her and ask for some advice. So she sent me some homework. I just don't like doing homework. She was telling me, well, you need to measure the plot first of all and decide how much land you've got. So I've got to get a long tape measure out. Then she recommended I do test my soil for the pH, so I know what the pH is. I know that my husband did that years ago. I think is it 7 that's in the middle? I think I'm going for pH 7. Do I really have to do that? And then she said that I need to look and observe the garden during the day and presumably across the seasons to see where the light falls. So I'm pleased to report that I have done that bit of homework. Well, at least I've done it in the evening. I keep forgetting to check in the morning. But this gets the whole garden is south-facing, pretty much south-facing. But because we've got all those trees at the back of the garden, it does, there is quite a lot of shade and shadow. So the only time this border is in full sun is actually on a summer's evening. So it's been quite warm out here. You might see that we've repositioned our bench that used to be by the pond. So we've been coming out in the evening, and although we can't see the sunset, the sun is definitely beating down on our faces. So I know it's getting the evening sunshine. I need to check if that's west, that'll be east. I need to check how much early morning sunshine it's getting. I suspect not a lot, and just double check in the height of the midday sun actually how much of that sun is getting to the border. Because the boring part of gardening, I've realised, and this is something my husband's been telling me for years and years, that as I'm going around the garden centre, I'm saying I'll have one of that, one of that, one of that. He says, well, you need to understand the growing conditions, you need to understand the soil, and you need to understand the aspect, the amount of sunshine it gets and the local conditions. So it's no good just flicking through a book like a seed, and just thinking, I like pink and choosing everything in pink. You have to have a little bit of knowledge before you start. And this is what puts me off, because I don't have that knowledge, and I haven't had to have that knowledge because my husband always does the gardening, and I do think that you don't need two experts in the same house. So he has been our gardening expert for all these years, decades in fact, but now he's sort of hanging up his gardening tools a little bit. I'm just wondering whether on this side of the garden I could put my gardening gloves on and have a go. So his advice was, instead of thinking about the whole lot, that he would put the lawn seed on it. And in fact, I don't remember the variety he's chosen, but he did tell me that it's got, for a lawn seed anyway, it's got quite a lot of clover in it. And when I say quite a lot, I think he said it was like a 3% clover mix, because gone are those days when we just want a grass lawn, and anything that isn't grass that we consider to be a weed and no longer wanted. So you've got those pesticides or the weed killers that would have eradicated the clover from your lawn in previous years. Now we're coming a bit more aware, aren't we, about the biodiversity, the changing climate and the species decline, that he's specifically chosen a lawn seed that's got clover in it. So that means that we get that lovely dark patches, and of course, I don't know if we've got the white or the pink, we'll have to wait and see. But with us perhaps mowing our lawns slightly less frequently, it'll allow the flowers to grow, no mow May, let June bloom, and it should be a lovely food source for all those nectar-loving creatures. So that is that a plan? That's the vague knowledge. So what he suggested I do, so he's going to seed it, so he can mow it with ease. And he suggested I start at this end of the garden, the tortoise enclosure, which was formerly just down here. So what he's done in my absence, I suddenly looked out of the window this morning, I thought, well, that's a bit brighter than it normally is. We have a lilac tree in that corner, so when we first moved into the house, We can see outside the kitchen window in those early months of the year, March and April time, a lovely lilac tree. Over time, it's become overgrown with ivy, which is a really good nectar source at that early time of the year. And of course, with my flower arranging hat on, come the run up to Christmas, when it's the flowers have turned into the berries, that it's really good for Christmas wreath making and for foliage for your winter flower arrangements. But what's happened is the tree has, it was probably an old lilac tree to start with, but it's become swamped, and I can just see a couple of sprigs of the lilac that probably need trimming off and deadheading. So he has decided that to let more light into that bed, he's chopped down the ivy. So I'm now left with pieces like this. So lo and behold, here I am, thinking I'm going to have a really good time planting my garden. I've now got bits of offcut like this that I've got to get rid of. So the downside with our home is that we don't have any side access, which was why we paid the clearance company to do the job for us. So they parked up on our drive, and everything that they took out through the garden had to go through the kitchen, which leads to my flower arranging workshop, which leads out to the front of the house. So I don't know why we didn't decide to ask them to take the ivy down, but of course plans develop. So what I'm going to have to do is I've got a sheet over here, and we do have a dead hedge at the back of the garden. So our garden goes right up to the our garden goes to the end of the garden. Don't think about that. Right at the end of the garden, it's a bit more of a woodland edge. There's a raised bit, and we've built a dead hedge. So we've got stakes in, and I don't think we've got any. I think we've got a wire netting to the neighbour so it doesn't fall into their garden. And there is remnants of an old hedge, I think hawthorn hedge there. So we've got stakes in here, back and front, and then as our greenery or the big sort of pruning takes place, we then lay everything down between the two stakes horizontally, and they rot down over time. And then every so often, sometimes it all, about once every 5 years, it kind of collapses, but you sort of need to push it down as it decays, and then you've got more room for everything else. So we have a system for doing this. I've got the neat system of doing it. Well, I like to lay it all down horizontally. And so it sort of, looks purposeful. It might be a wildlife garden, and we might have problems with the side access, but it looks purposeful. So when I do this job, and I hate these kind of jobs, I will try and lie it down. So I've got my sheet here, so I can sort of load my sheet up and then drag it to the end of the garden, and then I have to climb up on a little retaining wall at the end of the garden, and then pack it down into my the dead hedge. Now, I do know for a fact that if my husband was going to do this, his favourite hidey hole is just on the other side of the garden, and he just puts it, we've got conifers growing at that side of the garden, and he just sort of pushes it. It's a bit like chucking your rubbish under the bed, and his preferred method is just to push it all under bed, and it looks really, really messy. I like it neat and stacked, so I guess if I'm doing this job, I will do it my way and huff and puff about it. And if he was doing the job, he would do it his way. And I can't huff and puff about it. So that is going to be my job this afternoon. We will then be left with a blank canvas. So if you, I haven't measured, but if you were going to get me to estimate how long this patch is, I would say it's 10 metres by 3 metres. So perhaps if you live in a small Victorian terraced house, it may well be that the bit of garden that I'm going to take over would be the size of the back garden in a Victorian terraced house, something like that. So I've got a bit of manual labour to do, and hence I've got my gardening gloves on. And I've got a glass of water and my sun hat, and that is what I'm going to do for the rest of the afternoon. I'm not going to film myself doing it, that would be dreadfully tedious, but I'm going to have to manage these bits, and it may be that I need to cut them up a little bit so I can actually lay them out. We'll have to see how that goes. Again, this is the side of gardening I don't really enjoy, but actually it's a bit like housework, isn't it? That it's a bit of physical activity. I've got my pedometer on my wrist. I can get my steps up, and it's a bit of, exercise, better than going to the gym or an exercise class. It's a bit like when you actually do your housework properly and you're vacuuming around. It's actually quite hard work. So that is my job. Where you come in is, I don't know anything about gardening. I really don't. So I'm allowed to. And I'm going to obviously rely on my husband for sort of consultancy advice. But I think we've got two different areas of interest. His side of the garden, wildlife interest, native species, lots of ground cover, lots of colour, form and texture in terms of different foliages, versus my dream garden. And my key words are abundance. Instead of me scrapping around the garden trying to find 10 measly stems of a variety of things, I want to be able to come out and pick 30 stems of tulips come next spring and still have more in the garden. So that is my watchword, really, that I want to have things I can pick right the way through the year. And of course, the main growing season, June, July, August into September, I don't want it to then look really bare in the winter. So I want stuff in it that is going to give all round interest. Now, at this point, I should say I do follow two YouTubers, gardening YouTubers. One is the middle-sized garden blog. That's Alexandra. Now, Alexandra actually lives in town. She's just a bit way over there. So I will have to start watching her videos more keenly than I have done in the past. Another YouTuber I really enjoy is Linda Varta. So she does a mix of gardening, thrifting, and sort of home decor with a teeniest tiny touch of sort of DIY and craft in there. So it's sort of she promotes herself as or tags herself as a garden inspired lifestyle. So I've particularly been enjoying Linda's videos recently, because she has just moved house from 2-storey detached house to a bungalow, single storey bungalow. So she has built and designed a garden. I think she moved in December. So she's had 6 months in her garden. And she started on the front garden first, she's going around the side and then to the back. And I'm quite inspired by what she's been doing. But obviously that's her style and it's not necessarily my style. She loves topiary, she loves clipped balls of greenery. Now, I can't do a clipped ball of greenery, not because I don't have any skill with clipping, but because my greenery, I want to grow greenery to use in flower arrangements. So if I keep everything clipped and neat, it's never going to get sprigs long enough that I can cut. But she does have lots of colour as well. She's sort of got sort of purple and yellow citrus, vibrant greenish colour palette, and she also has lots of things in pots and really huge window boxes as well. So I'm going to sort of take some inspiration from her, take some inspiration from you. Please give me your comments and suggestions. And then I kind of need to have a plan. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I will draw a plan. It's nice to sort of set a goal and progress. But I think it'll be a plan when I start at the beginning and just dabble. Do I like it? Is it working? Before I commit to keeping all of it under control. And I realise as well that gardening is a lifestyle. It's not just what I do with my scissors, with my flower arranger. When I come out and spend a few minutes cutting things, we have quite a big bindweed problem in our garden. So it's going to be that kind of thing when I have my ritual, making my morning cup of tea, and in the winter when I light a candle as well, that I will need to get into the habit of walking the grounds. My husband and I used to do this in the evening when we first moved in, to see what had grown and, to cement the flower names in our minds. So I'm going to have to be here, 24/7, picking out bits of weed. But I guess it's keeping on top of it, isn't it? It's same as keeping your shower clean. If you actually all use the little shower wiper downer and spray every time you use the shower and mop up the water, it doesn't make the big clean. It makes the big clean easier because you've kept on it every single day. And I know for a fact that if somebody forgets to squeegee, that's the word I'm looking for, squeegee the shower, and then you go up and use the bathroom, and already you've got all those little chalk marks on there. So I think I'm getting into the habit of a little bit done every day saves you having to do a big job at the end of the week, and that is the mindset I'm going to have if I'm to have any gardening success and to keep on top of the bindweed, is I'm going to have to be pulling it out. And it's one of those weeds, isn't it, that because it grows round, spirals around your plants and suffocates them a bit, but when you pull it out, I believe that as you pull it out, if you leave any bit in, it then sprouts again, and perhaps even if you bits end up being cut, do they sprout again? So we have had a terrible bindweed problem, and I can see we've got a little bit of regrowth of things coming through. I can see we've got some of our native geraniums coming back, so I'm quite happy with those, but I'm pretty sure that I have seen some, look, I have seen some bindweed. Here is case in point, and look, the ground is so hard that all I've done is pick off the top bit, and I haven't actually got to the root at all. So perhaps I have to get a dedicated tool. And what do you, question for you, do you use proper gardening tools, or you grabber, do you have a dedicated piece of cutlery? I know my husband has all his lovely tools, but he does have some old knives, just butter knives and assorted. Sounds like he's a knife chopper, but to sometimes just be able to dig down a little bit to release the weeds, so I need to get on top of that. But what I think the most exciting thing will be deciding what to grow. So the time for planting isn't now, so here we are at the end of June. The conventional planting season for shrubs and things is November through to March, where it's cooler and wetter, and your plant materials have got a chance to become established before the hot weather kicks in. And I did ask my husband the other night whether it's too late to sow seeds. It would be lovely, wouldn't it, if I could just sort of scatter some seeds. 6 weeks later I've got a field full of something, I don't quite know. So I guess this year has to be the end of the summer now, so from now until the beginning of November is my planning part. So what do I do? Have you got any good gardening books you can recommend? Have you got, if you're a gardener, have you got any tips for me for my sunny evening sunshine border of approximately 10 metres by 3 metres with just average soil? If you're a flower arranger and you have a beautiful garden and you've been growing flowers that you enjoy cutting, what kind of flowers have you had success with? The kind of things I think in terms of abundance. Well, the other sort of vibe I'm going for as well is, when you go to a stately home and you go and look around the gardens and you look at the herbaceous borders, which perhaps they are about 3 metres deep, and sometimes they have little paths around the back so the gardener can get round and do all the planting from the back instead of doing it all from the front. That again is the kind of look I'm going for. So I want some long stuff, some bushy stuff, and short stuff, but abundance. So cosmos, Japanese anemone. Do I want delphiniums? Do I want larkspur? Wouldn't it be lovely to have roses? I'm just doing, I'm looking for some roses at the moment to use as a cut flower for my latest in my Julie and Julia, the flower edit project. And we have some roses, but they're sort of the rambling roses. They're not sort of vase roses. So do I want to grow roses? Dahlias are really fashionable at the moment. Now my husband does grow dahlias. He grows them in pots, but there's never really enough blooms to cut. There might be, I could perhaps cut 1, 2, 6 perhaps, but it's not the abundance I'm after. So I want things that are really easy to grow and I get lots of them. And sort of, that is them. And I want different forms as well. Everything in our garden, if I was to be a little bit critical that flowers is a bit ditty-dotty. I want things that are, some statement, exactly as it would be if you were making a flower arrangement. I want my focal flowers, I want my filler flowers, I want my line forms, my round shapes, my sprays, and all those kind of things that you would put together in a vase. I want to have that in the garden. So you know how these things go. I did have Sarah Raven's book, The Cutting Garden, which I think was first published in 1994. I got married in 95, and I think probably it was a Christmas present for my husband shortly after that. And I sort of flipped through the pages and didn't do anything about it. So, what is a good source to start with? And the problem with that Sarah Raven book, well, it's not a problem with the book at all, a very sound advice. But in the great declutter of 2020, I'm sure I've decluttered it. I did check my bookcase because I do have a lot of flower arranging books. I'm sure that is the only place it would be because it's my book and not my husband's books. He has gardening books somewhere else. So in the last 3 years, may well be in the last 18 months or even the last 6 months, at some point I've either taken that book to a car boot fair, I've donated to the charity shop, or I've sold it somewhere. Anyway, I haven't got it anymore. So I have got one sort of garden stroke flower arranging book, and perhaps I'll show that to you next week. But having flicked through it, I don't quite know whether it's going to do the job. So I'm really relying on you, my lovely viewers, to kind of steer me in the right direction. And perhaps you could become my accountability partner, because I really am. Well, you've heard me say it in the videos before, I'm not a gardener. My husband does the gardening. I don't really have an interest in gardening. And that sort of nurturing thing doesn't really interest me at the moment. But perhaps if these little seedlings become my little children, that may all change. So yes, what flowers should I grow? And what foliages should I grow? And how can I make this a really beautiful garden? And really, to prove my husband wrong, he thinks I'm just going to give up and it will just be lawn. But I think it will look really lovely. Really white beds, full of colour. Now colour, what do you think about colour? So do I go, just choose the plant and whatever colour it comes in? Or am I more restrictive with my colour palette? So if you ask my husband what colour our garden was, he would say that he always veers towards the sort of purple blues, so pink, red and purpley blue, that kind of colour. Although looking around, there are some accents of white, because of course I think you probably see some little bits of white there, oxeye daisy. So a little bit of white's nice, because in the night time, in the evening, it sort of glows a little bit. And we do have a little bit of a bright yellow, the euphorbia, and I can see some like yellow buttercups in the pond. We've got some lemon balm, we've got a yellow honeysuckle, and we've got a golden privet as well. So there's a sort of yellowy tone. So again, do I stick to a strict colour palette, or do I just go wild? I don't want an all white garden, because I think that would look really odd, because everything across the other side is quite, well, it's not all white. It's got more of a mix, although the range of colours is still quite mixed. So even though it's going to be my garden and my husband's garden, I would like them to talk together, to meet in the middle and have agreement about some things. So that is the plan. So there are a couple of things. If you are going to plot it for me and draw it for me, 10 metres by 3 metres, west facing, lots of sunshine. We do have things that will be kept. So a very old, decrepit lilac tree covered in ivy. We then have rosemary with a Japanese maple behind. There is a pear tree in the garden here. And then there's a maple tree next. And then I don't know whether you can see. Oh, you can. The white there, that is a rose that's sort of growing up through one of the conifers, and then actually, rather handily, it's sort of doing that over where the bench is. So when you're sitting on the bench, you actually feel slightly enclosed. So it's a little white flower at the moment, and in the autumn time, it's got a lovely small rose hip on it. And it's always been too high to pick, because the chicken shed was there before. So what you can see, the fencing up there is the side wall of the chicken shed, and we've kept that. So it's quite nice to sort of have that flush of colour. All the flush of colour is white, but you know what I mean. And I will because it's coming down now, it's more accessible, I'll be able to use 3 little tiny rose hips for autumn door wreaths and things like that. So that's quite exciting. And then we've got this sort of reorganisation of, we've got the path going up that wiggles. Originally it was wiggling around all the outhouses. And there's been a bit of a realignment because there's sort of more of a patio area developing. So I don't think I can actually plant anything at the top end at the moment if I was going to get a move on, because that's where the chicken shed was, and the fresh chicken poo won't have had time to rot down. It's going be hot and steamy for plants. But I thought perhaps a way to get around that would be to plant, get some big, I'm imagining terracotta pots. Again, this gives me something to look for in the charity shop and when I'm car booting. To, some nice big containers, I could plant my abundance of tulips, daffodils, whatever I choose. So that could be a little patio area that in the springtime had lots and lots of colour around it. So that's my sort of gist of where I'm going at the moment. And I'd welcome your advice, your comments and your suggestions. I am slightly thinking that I've bitten off more than I can chew and I haven't even got started yet. So I was having a bit of a giggle with my sister that, I might well have to admit to defeat and tell my husband that it's fine, he can keep it all lawned. But I just think it would be nice to have things, to have stuff like, to crop. I'm not talking about selling flowers, this is purely for myself. Perhaps I could take some along to classes and things like that. I just really fancy wafting around the garden, on a summer's morning with my straw hat on and my floral skirt and my basket. Of course, really, a bucket full of water, and just being able to cut in abundance. I just feel I need a little bit of abundance in my life. And now I've got an opportunity to do it because we're just having that little bit of a change. So I'm probably going to leave it there. I've got my gardening gloves on and I've got my sheet on the ground. I need to commit to doing this, which means I need to clear it's quite a big pile. It's probably 1 metre high by about 1.5 metres square. It's quite a big lot of the ivy there. And to get rid of that, to hide that in the garden in the dead hedge, and order that, I've got this blank canvas so that perhaps when I may take more of an interest in Gardener's World on a Friday evening. I know one of my sisters gets Gardener's World magazine, so perhaps I could be on the recycling that magazine as it moves through all the family. And yes, perhaps I might even become a connoisseur of gardening books. I've certainly got plenty enough of flower arranging books and I don't need any more. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you have got comments, suggestions, planting plans, what you would plant if you had a dream garden and you were starting from scratch, please do let me know in the comments. So I have got another job to do once I've cleared away the ivy. Zoom flower class tomorrow. It's not Zoom flower class. YouTube Flower Club is on tomorrow, on Wednesday at 2:30 in the afternoon. We are making meadow boxes using sand as the mechanic. So I'll be going around my garden trying to pick longish lengths of flower that sort of have a meadow theme. So the theme for tomorrow's Flower Club, YouTube Flower Club, which is only available for those of you in my YouTube membership group, is to imagine that you've dug up a piece of wildflower meadow. Please don't go and do that. And you've planted it in a bowl and you are supporting your flowers by using sand. So that's my next job. And if you are interested in joining my membership group, there's a link to that in the description underneath the video. $8.99 a month. You get access to my regular Monday uploads a few days early, advert free, and you do get one free flower arranging class a month, plus a little bit of extra behind the scenes going on too. So I shall say goodbye, and I really need to stop talking and get on and do some hard work. Oh goodness me, wish me luck.